Huzzah and well met to all of my bannermen and ladies tonight. And for this video, I first want to say thank you so very much. We have reached over 200 subscribers. It's fantastic. It turns out if you just ask nicely, apparently lots of people are willing to oblige. So that's awesome. My last video about dropper lines, which I felt was useful for the knowledge, but you'll probably never build one of them. It is one of my more popular videos recently, so that's something else. So today we're going to talk about droppers again, but this time we're combining them with water streams, and this is going to be droppers as unloaders and disposals. So these first four in the front here are droppers that are either singular speed or able to go much slower. So we'll talk about this really very basic unloader, and you might be familiar with this as this is what powers our item elevators, except that the dropper is facing into the water stream instead of vertically, but otherwise it works the same way. The observer observes an item entering or leaving the chest, sends a signal through our blue concrete, powering our repeater, powering our blue concrete again, and then that powers our dropper. Every time it receives power, it deposits one of the items into the stream, or drops it, you might say. It's smart in quotation marks in that it uses a single observer just to observe what's in the chest. Nope, I didn't want to do all that. But it will only be firing as long as there's items to change what the observer is observing. And that is as basic as it gets for an unloader or a water stream unloader. We can turn this into a disposal very easily by placing a cactus at the end. Well, let's get something I don't mind throwing away at the moment. And as our shroom lights bump into the cactus there, they'll be destroyed. So that's how we can make this into a disposal, something to get rid of excess items. If you want a safety mechanism for something like this, whoops, we'll break this. And it clicked twice that you heard right there because we were making changes to that. So we're going to use a trap chest right here. The observer observed us changing what was sitting above it, which is why it made the dropper click. Be sure that you're using droppers for these and not dispensers. I think in most cases a dispenser would work. It certainly won't work for those dropper lines over there. But most of these are a single dropper that's just placing something outside of itself into a water stream to be carried away. But anyways, back to what I was saying. With the trap chest, you notice that the area around the latch is a little bit more red. And if you look quickly, it's very red on top of that latch. But anything you put into the chest, you might have just heard our observer observe that things went in, but nothing will leave the chest until you exit and close this. So if you'd like just a bit of a safety so that you don't set things in the chest and have them immediately start being thrown away, because another way that we can make this into a disposal is, well, I'll show you that on the next one, but you just need the dropper to drop things into lava. So this is, well, this first example doesn't have any adjustment to its speed. You don't want to uh, fiddle around with the repeater here, because doing so will make you have items that get stuck inside, and eventually your disposal or your water stream unloader dropper will be clogged up with too many items to function any longer. You'll have the hopper backed up to the point that nothing can fall out of the chest, meaning the observer doesn't have anything to observe and it can't activate, and Then you have to manually go in and clean everything out, and that's a pain. That's why we're automating, is so that we don't have to manually do things. At any rate, this is covered in levers, and I will explain why in a moment, but for the moment, just ignore those. We use a downward facing dropper on this model. You can see it right here. And we use a concrete block and a comparator in subtract mode to detect if there are items in the dropper. That comparator, when it gets a signal that there are items in the dropper, and it can be any number of items, even one single item, will activate our system. The comparator says to itself, hey, I'm getting a signal, and sends it forward through our next concrete block, which powers this redstone, powering this concrete block, which powers this repeater, and powers this redstone. Now, this redstone dust has two jobs. One, it moves on here to this concrete block, which soft powers our dropper and activates it for one use. The other way that it goes is back into the comparator. So what happens here is our comparator in subtract mode. This is normal. That's subtract mode with the light on in front. Sends a signal forward if it receives any signal at all. The signal it sends forward is a strength of 15, and you can see it goes 1, 2, 3, and a fourth block into the repeater. Now, if this was just a bit of redstone dust, it would be a signal strength for less than 15, so 11. And the power would go into the side of the comparator, and it would subtract that amount from the power it is sending forward. Because our repeater is right here, this signal is at strength of 14 as it leaves the repeater. Or, I'm sorry, as it leaves the redstone dust and goes to the comparator, it's at a signal strength of 14. 15 minus 14 is 1, so the signal dies in the blue concrete block here, shutting down the whole circuit. But as soon as that happens, the comparator is turned back on by detecting that there are still items in the dropper, and it lights up the circuit a second time. And this continues to cycle and cycle and cycle until everything is out of the box. Now, the reason these are smart and adjustable is that you can turn this repeater down, and it slows the whole process down, as you can hear it ticking slower and slower. Now, if you've been following my content for a while, you might know that this is how we slow down a note block for an allay sorter to work as efficiently as possible. Because the allay can only drop items and pick up new items so fast, we do need to slow down the signal occasionally. And there's other reasons that you might want your dropper to slow things down. Perhaps you want to bottleneck your farm and not send things on to furnaces or to um, perhaps an auto crafting setup in some way as we go. And that way you can control just how quickly your items are headed downstream. Now, as for all of these levers here, this is an example of how we can apply power to this redstone dust to lock up the system. As long as this redstone dust is constantly powered, nothing will be dropping out of the dropper. So that's how we can have a manual shutdown on a system like this. And it works with all of these that I'm going to show you. I will demonstrate when we get to that point all the places that a lever could be. But if you power this block, this blue concrete block, or this blue concrete block, or even these two gray concrete blocks from any direction, you can lock up the system so that it doesn't work. And that might be a good way to not accidentally throw things in the box and have them leave permanently if you choose to make this some kind of disposal instead of just a water stream unloader. Or you may just want to have your farm be producing without sending things on to the next processing point in your setup. So, what if one repeater is not slow enough? Because you've seen in my allay farms that they need, or my allay sorters, that they need quite a bit of time between tones on the note block. So, what we can do is, instead of having the comparator directly power a block and then dust, we have the comparator power a repeater and then a block, because the whole cycle takes place in these 6 blocks here that I'm circling or orbiting nearby. So you can take and add as many repeaters as you want at whatever delay that you'd like. Perhaps you only need 3 ticks of delay on one and one on another. That's the same as 4 ticks of delay on one when the circuit's set up like this, but you could extend it as far as you'd like. This one, I only went as far as the water stream length just for brevity, but you could theoretically send this off into eternity as long as you have enough repeaters and patience to watch a redstone signal slow walk itself into the sunset and then back. These are all the very same. And once again, if you power this little bit of redstone dust next to the comparator, you will have locked up the system. So these can be made to be very, very slow. And just for demonstration purposes, you can see how slowly that signal came back to the comparator. We can even do it here as well, just for demonstration purposes. Oop, my helper is here to visit. But as you can see, we're getting far more cacti than we're getting treasure chests coming down the pipelines. And that's how these slow droppers and slow disposals work, with using repeaters to delay the signal. We'll take these out of here so that we don't have incessant clicking while we're trying to learn some things. But what if you want disposals that are faster? Well, we have an answer for that too. So this here is a double speed disposal. It is almost identical to our repeater delay circuit, the third one over there, except that we are going to have a comparator after our second concrete block. So this comparator, not in subtract mode, this is just a comparator in its normal state, is detecting for items in the dropper. The comparator will check through this block and into the dropper and send its signal onto the repeater, which powers this blue concrete. This comparator in subtract mode is doing the same thing as all of our other comparators in subtract mode, but this is going to be noticeably faster. So if there is a signal from this concrete block, this comparator puts out a signal strength of 15 that goes 1, 2, 3 blocks back to itself, making it subtract a signal strength of 12. So once it subtracts 12 from 15, it doesn't have enough power to send it all the way through again to itself, which means it's shut down, and it cycles again, because once it's shut down, the comparator senses the signal from the concrete block and reasserts it, so that this just continues to turn on and off and on and off. This redstone dust will constantly flash, powering this repeater. And we use a repeater right here because if you use a redstone dust, it will connect to that comparator, which will cause confusion to this concrete block, meaning that we'd have essentially a short in the circuit. So what that does then is power this redstone dust, powering this green concrete block, powering our dropper. We have here, if you watched my video on high-speed dropper lines, you should know what's going on here already. But if not, go watch that video. I'll link it in the description. And we have a chest where it has two hoppers beneath it so that it can drop two items at a time into the hoppers, or the hoppers can take two items at a time from the chest. One sends down directly to the dropper, one sends down, and the hopper beneath that is also pointed into the dropper. But the tendency of hoppers is to send an item downward or pull an item downward before sending them laterally. So you will have items falling into both columns of hoppers and both being force fed into the dropper at double speed. So you'll see these dropping by twos at a time, and you can see just how fast this circuit flashes. Once again, it's smart enough that uh, once the once the dropper is empty, this comparator will no longer be detecting, which means this comparator will no longer be getting a signal from the blue concrete block, and it's smart enough to just shut off if it's not working. Two reasons for that. The clicking is annoying. Secondly, if you are on a server, and even if you're not, lighting from redstone torches, excuse me, counts as lighting updates and can cause a great deal of lag to your world or um, to your server, to your friends if you're playing with friends. So just bear that in mind when you're making one of these. Same options with this. You can use a trap chest so that if you put something in here as a disposal, it doesn't immediately get sucked down and thrown away, because these become incredibly quick. So I promised I would show you what we're doing to make a disposal out of these right now, or earlier, so let's do it right now. That's all it takes. Instead of a water stream, and I've shown you these water streams with the circuit built above so that you can turn and twist them whichever direction you'd like. If you need your water stream to go over that way, you're just fine with that. And if you haven't watched my video on water streams, well, I suppose this isn't very confusing, but you might want to enlighten yourself with those. And this is how quickly we can get rid of a whole stack of maybe chests that we built on accident. Oh, I probably should have put some glass in there in place of that because they're all sitting on the edge there, but that works. And that was a whole stack of treasure chests just gone. But maybe that's still not fast enough for you. And you might recognize this column as one of our high-speed hopper lines that I showed you a couple of videos ago. We can use a minecart set on top of four hoppers to get some really high-speed emptying of a chest, and with two droppers on this line and two hoppers underneath four hoppers, we can really feed these into droppers and get rid of things quickly. If you were to need your farm to empty out quickly, instead of, say, a chest like this, or perhaps you'll have a hopper feeding into a chest like this where another minecart with a hopper empties into that hopper into the chest, and then here we might need this chest to be emptied very quickly so that the next minecart in line can be move into position to be emptied. You could have a farm that's just super overproductive, or maybe you've built some gigantic monstrosity that just produces so much of an item that you need things moved out of the way now. And that's totally understandable. Um, so, what's going on here is we're having two of the same circuit combined into one. So we have a comparator on the green concrete block looking at one dropper and sending its signal forward. So the green concrete block here will light up this redstone dust, and this comparator, if it detects any items in this dropper, will light up the same redstone dust. So we essentially combine both of these circuits into one point. And so for the cyan concrete, we have this repeater reading from that dust that can be lit up by either one of the droppers having an item in there. So you won't have your system empty one dropper and leave an item in the other dropper. It will detect and activate if there's items in either dropper. If for some reason your this doesn't work quite right and one side gets loaded up and the other one doesn't for some reason. So we're doing the same thing again as we have a comparator in subtract mode receiving a signal from this cyan concrete block. And it sends that onward, and I actually have that broken for while I was building it. It sends it onward to another cyan concrete block, powering that block, which powers the dust on top of it. And because it's a comparator in subtract mode, it sends on a signal strength of 15, and then it loops around back into itself, subtracting again. So 1, 2, 3, and it subtracts the power so that it shuts off. So this functions just the same way as the blue concrete block of that dropper setup. This signal splits off, sending the redstone signal to both of our original concrete blocks, which power the droppers. And we will watch this one immediately empty out a whole stack of something. So let's do that now. How about smokers? Just something to grab. And once again, I will link the other videos. You can see how quickly that's emptying out that box and just how fast it's throwing out all of those. It's already finished before I could finish my sentence. So here's a small example in back because I don't have any examples in my water stream video of funneling. You'll have to do it on a direction because it's not practical to squeeze one water stream to another. You could do something like an L shape here and start the water stream so that it goes from here to here and then follows on in a single stream that way. That works just as well. But this is something I hadn't shared before. You could just send two water streams to a singular stream to sort of squeeze them down into into a single wide stream, depending on what your needs are in your world or what it is you're trying to build. So that was pretty fast, and maybe still that's not enough speed for you. And if you're that fast, tell Sonic I said hi. But anyways, this is a quadruple speed with 4 droppers, and once again, we are doing the same thing. We have 4 separate circuits, all tied into the same sort of possibility here, or the same junction point. So any one of these circuits can activate this repeater if they detect items inside the dropper. It's all comparators, not in subtract mode, except for this one, which should be. Once the cyan concrete receives any sort of signal, the comparator activates and powers this cyan concrete, which powers the dust on top. It does the same thing, splitting off to power the droppers over that way and sending the signal around to cycle itself once again. Um, you can build these in the mirror as well, so I'll linger here for a second so you can see what's going on and just flip it from side to side. Uh, I did it actually the other way first, and then I liked it better for the look of the demonstration world. And what I had to do was swap the blue concrete to here, green up, light blue here, light green up, and switch the places of the repeaters just so that the cyan was on the outside up here, because this cyan has to be at the outside corner so that any of these repeaters, if they were facing this way, could be fed into that and start this circuit. But I think you understand what I'm trying to say there. And once again, water stream. This is a 4 wide water stream inside, but you don't have to do that. You could fill that with lava. You could have this all come down to bump into cacti. And that's really it. A trap chest in place of the normal chest could save you from accidentally throwing things away, because this guy is super quick. Already done. And once again, we're just kind of demonstrating how to send everything down. But this is, I mean, not requiring you to watch water streams, at least basic water streams. And let's see, high speed hopper lines. And you could probably get away without watching the dropper line video. But yeah, I will link those in the description. I hope this has been super helpful, because we're building on this towards high speed rail unloaders. And this is becoming a very long video, so I will wrap it up here. We have completed the basic videos on how to move your items, so that's why we started a new row of displays here. I will get to work on linking this world or having a world download for you all. We're only missing allays in the basic section, which is kind of funny because I don't think allays are very basic, but in this definition, they can move your items from one place to another, so they do count. Beyond that, I appreciate you watching. I appreciate your comments, your likes, all the subscriptions. It's been, I think my analysis said 240% more subscriptions this week. Oh, hey, our cactus grew. Uh, just like our subscriber base. And I hope you are all blessed on your next quests, and I will see you after my next adventure. Goodbye.